Welcome. My name is Alex, and this is Watch Repair Tutorials. I retired from watchmaking after 35 years, and today I love sharing what I know about this incredible craft. This is lesson 2 of our basic series for amateur watchmakers just getting started. Today's lesson is all about the first tools you need and why you should care about them. Before we start, I just want to say that when it comes to tools, always buy the best you can afford. Quality matters, but not everything has to be Bergeon. There are certain tools that you can get by with less expensive brands without sacrificing the quality of your work. The next thing to know is that this list is based on the 9 tools used when learning watch repair the way I teach it, using a new ST36 movement. If you're going to try to learn by buying old watches and taking them apart and trying to fix them, then there are a lot of other tools that you're going to need as well. When it comes to watchmaking tools, I don't think anyone would disagree that the 2 most important tools are your tweezers and screwdrivers. So I'm going to start with the screwdriver because that's where there seems to be the most confusion. There seems like there's hundreds of different options, but if you look closely, there's really not as many as you think. Here I have 4 different sets of screwdrivers, all at different price points. What separates them are the 3 main components that make up the screwdriver. The shank is the body you hold, typically made of steel. It is textured or knurled to prevent the screwdriver from slipping between your fingers. At the top of the handle is the rotating cap, which should spin freely, allowing you to apply steady pressure on the screw and allowing you to turn the screwdriver smoothly. The blade or tip is the part that engages with the screw. There are 2 styles of tips available, the wedge shape and the T-shape or hollow ground tip, and each have their own advantages. For the beginner, the wedge shape tip makes the most sense because it's going to be the most versatile. This first set of screwdrivers is probably one of the most widely seen ones on the internet. And they're popular, but mostly with people trying to tighten a screw on their eyeglasses. The main issue with these screwdrivers is the rotating cap. When you hold a screwdriver and rotate it with your middle finger and thumb, the cap needs to turn freely under your finger. Otherwise, the screwdriver will slip out of the screw slot, scratching the movement, or worse, damaging the hairspring. On this set, even the ones that do turn freely feel really rough and scratchy. If you've never worked with tiny screws before, this is not going to help you. The second issue with these types of screwdrivers is that the tips are really soft. And because they're so soft, that means that they're going to break very easily, increasing the amount of time that you do actually need to sharpen them. This next set of screwdrivers is made by a Korean company called TimeLab, and for me are one of the best values out there. A set of 6 is reasonably priced and performs as well as the higher end screwdrivers that we're going to be looking at in a few minutes. The plastic rotating caps turn smoothly on the steel shank, which helps to keep the screwdriver tip in the screw slot. And overall, the screwdriver feels really good in the hand. If there's a negative, and it is a small one, is that the hole for the screwdriver blade is not machined as precisely as what you'll see in the higher end screwdrivers, which means that the tip would be slightly off center. But to be quite honest with you, it's really not that noticeable. Next, we have our two high-end sets. The first is made by Bergeon, which has the same type of plastic rotating cap and is what most people consider one of the top of the line screwdriver sets. I've replaced the standard wedge-shaped tips with a set of T-shaped tips, which we're going to talk about in a minute. The next is my Hortex set, which comes standard with T-shaped or hologram tips. And the reason I upgraded to these is mainly because they have ball bearings between the rotating cap and the shaft. And what I really like is that they're available in over 14 different sizes. Now, I did buy them individually so that I could skip the cost of $250 that Hortex charges for the base, and I just went with a standard base that I got off AliExpress. Here's a pro tip for you. When using the screwdriver, try positioning the rotating cap on the middle of your pointing finger instead of on the tip. I think you'll find it easier to control the shaft, and the screwdriver will be way more steady. Now, if you're just starting out and you can get by with a set of 6 screwdrivers, that's usually going to include sizes from 2mm down to 0.8mm. But if you have the resources and you can get the full set of 9, they're going to come with sizes from 2.5mm all the way down to 0.5mm. No matter what set of screwdrivers you get, it's important to remember that none of these screwdriver tips are ready to start removing screws. And that's where tool number 2 comes in. When you use a screwdriver, not only do you want to use one that's not quite as wide as the screw slot, but you want the sides of the wedge to touch the edges of the screw slot itself. If they don't, the tip of the blade will touch the bottom of the slot, causing the tip to slide out and scratch the plate or bridge. The next issue is that you don't get the full torque from the screwdriver when it's loose in the slot. And because of this, you can damage the edges of the screw slots themselves. Next time you open a vintage movement, just look at the condition of the screws and you will see what I mean. This is why a lot of new watchmakers struggle with removing screws. Now, screw sizes are not going to be consistent from one movement to the next. So when changing from one movement to another, you need to size the screwdriver tips to the screws in the movement you're working on. This is one of the main reasons you see watchmakers have multiple sets of screwdrivers. Now, the old standard for sharpening blades, which has been used forever, consists of a wooden block with a thin sharpening stone inlaid in the center. When you're looking at a screw, and if the screw blade is the right width, but it's too sharp, it's going to touch the bottom of the slot. When this is the case, you only need to hold the screwdriver at a 90-degree angle to the stone and remove just enough of the tip so that the sides touch the edge of the screwdriver slot. The sides of the tip should be snug to the sides of the slot, and the tip of the blade should be just off the bottom of the slot. If the blade barely fits inside the screw slot, when you try to turn it, the tip's going to slide out of the screw, not only damaging the screw, but perhaps the case. In this case, the whole tip will need to be resized for that screw. To do this, the screwdriver is held in a special holder that basically is made from 2 spring-loaded tubes that have holes drilled through them and a wheel on each side. The key here is when you insert the screwdriver into the holder, one side of the blade tip needs to be flat on the stone. It's important to maintain the correct angle. Then you just use light pressure and you run the blade over the stone for let's say around 10 passes, and then you flip the blade over and you do the same number of passes on the other side. Using equal passes keeps the tip symmetrical. Now you can check the fit of the screw slot and remove material from the edge until it fits snug without touching the bottom of the slot. My preferred method today is using diamond lapping film. Now I've tried many brands and I've found that this brand by Sharpening products is by far the best. This is the same product I used in the video I did on screw polishing. So all I do is I cut 1-inch strips. They're self-adhesive and I stick them to a piece of plate glass. I start off with 80 micron to do the cutting, followed by 30 micron to smooth, and 15 micron to polish. Now, you don't have to polish with it if you don't want to, but I like to keep my tools looking nice. Now, just to compare the difference between sharpening on a regular sharpening stone, here's the tip that's been sharpened with a stone, and that looks okay, right? Here's the tip I just did with the diamond lapping film. Imagine if it'll make a screwdriver tip look like this, imagine the black polish it'll put on a screw head. Once you have finished, you can just size the tip the way we did before. And you can see our screw tip is off the bottom and is tight to the sides of the slot. Now, when first starting out, I would recommend just getting a set like the Time Lab screwdrivers. But at any time, you can replace the blades of the Time Lab screwdrivers with hollow ground tips. And then, if you wanted to, you could even add another set. And here's why. The main advantage of hollow ground is that because the sides are curved, those screwdrivers are going to fit more screws as long as the tip doesn't bottom out on the bottom of the screw slot. Now I have two primary sets. I have one where I've removed about 25% of the original length of the straight part of the tip, and I have another set where I've removed about 50% of the length. Now that's material moved from just the straight part, right? With these two sets of screwdrivers, I can now fit almost every screw I run into without having to sharpen anything. And then if I run across something odd, I just grab one of my regular screwdrivers. So remember, if you start off with a decent set of screwdrivers, then you can always upgrade the tips at a later time, add another set if you'd like, and you don't have to deal with screwdrivers that don't work very well. Now there's one other screwdriver that I would probably recommend that you stay away from. When you first see it, it looks pretty nice. It has the same type of smooth rotating cap. It's got a very nice knurled shank, but the issue is with the blade. What you'll notice is that this blade can't be upgraded. The way the screwdriver is made is all the holes that are drilled in the shank to receive the blade are all drilled at the same size. And then what they do for each individual blade size is they take their bar stock and about halfway down, they turn it down for whatever blade size it is. And what that means is that you can never upgrade the blades. You can only use this style of blade. So you wouldn't be able to use Bergeron blades, for example, and you certainly wouldn't be able to use the T-shaped blades. And that brings us to what's generally regarded as the second most important tool, the tweezers. In watchmaking, there's no shortage of tweezers. You've got big, heavy duty ones. You've got specialty tweezers for working on hairsprings. You have brass or bronze tweezers. You have tweezers made for installing watch hands, tweezers for cutting hairsprings, for straightening pivots. You have tweezers for forming overcoils on hairsprings, lubricating mainsprings, plastic tweezers for installing quartz batteries, curved tweezers, and standard straight tweezers. But don't get confused by all of this. All you need to worry about at this point is your primary tweezer. The importance of having a good set of primary tweezers cannot be overstated. They are the extension of your brain to your fingers. And if your tweezers don't feel natural in your hands, you're going to be spending a lot of time crawling around on the floor. Not only do you need to be able to pick up a bridge, but they have to be delicate enough to be able to pick up and control tiny springs and end stones that are so small they can't be seen by the naked eye. People have different opinions on the tweezers that they like, but for my money, the Dumont No. 3 in carbon steel and the Horatec No. 3 anti-magnetic are by far the best all-around tweezers out there. If you're not sure what you like and you want to try some different styles of tweezers, I found a set by Fietta that not only has a size like the Dumont and Horatec No. 3, but it comes with curved tweezers, which some people prefer as well as their version of the Dumont No. 6, which is a specialty tweezer used for hairspring work. Here's a pro tip for you. One of the advantages of higher quality tweezers is the spline allows you to open and close the tips, the spine being the backbone of the tweezer. This allows you to adjust the gap of the opening between the tips, which is super important when you're handling things like jewels. It requires less pressure to hold a small item when the tips are closer together. Imagine trying to pick up a jewel with the spacing between these tips. You can open them wide and then close them back. You can't do that with lower quality tweezers. Most of the movements can be taken apart with just your screwdrivers and tweezers. But there is one part that requires a special puller, and that's the cannon pinion. The cannon pinion is part of the motion works, and it's what the minute hand is mounted to. In most cases, it snaps onto the extended arbor of the center wheel, and it grips that arbor with a precise amount of pressure. It needs to be tight enough to allow it to carry the minute hand around the dial, and it needs to be loose enough to be able to set the time without tearing up the gears in the motion works. So when you're removing this, you need to do it in a very careful way. When you squeeze the arms of the cannon pinion remover, it grips the cannon pinion, and the plastic feet push down on the movement, and it gently pulls up the cannon pinion to release it. Now, this is not a tool that you really need to spend a lot of money on because it's pretty simple. Removing the cannon pinion with tweezers, like I've seen some people do, is risky because you can not only bend or break the cannon pinion, but you could damage another part of the plate. For cannon pinion removers, you can just get by with something inexpensive. Buying quality eye loupes should be important for obvious reasons. You have to be able to see what you're doing. First thing to know about loupes is that you wear it on your dominant eye. And when you look at the watch movement, you keep both eyes open. I see a lot of people will just close one eye and they'll look through the loupe. You want to have both eyes open, but you do need to wear it on your dominant eye. Normally, if you are right-handed, your dominant eye will also be on the right side, but that's not true for everyone. To check to see which of your eyes is dominant, you can do the triangle test. Extend your arms in front of you and form a small triangle opening by touching your thumb and your pointing fingers together. And this will create a triangle. Now, with both of your eyes open, look through that triangle at a distant object like a clock or a doorknob or something. First, close your right eye while keeping your left eye open. Then close your left eye while keeping your right eye open. The eye through which the object stays centered in the opening of the triangle is your dominant eye. If the object shifts out of view when one eye is closed, that closed eye is the non-dominant one. Now that you're sure about which eye is dominant, let's look at what makes one loupe different from the next. The first thing to understand about loupes is the focal point. Now, the focal point refers to the distance between the loupe and the movement when it becomes clear and in focus. The higher the magnification, the shorter the focal distance is going to be. For general work, with lower magnification between, let's say, a 3 and a 5, that's going to give you a longer focal distance, allowing more room to work comfortably under the loupe. Higher magnifications for inspection, say, between 7 and 10, might only have a focal point of an inch or so, but this is necessary when you want to zoom in close for the inspection of jewels or gear teeth or to make some kind of fine adjustment. Now, if you're asking yourself if focal distance really matters that much, the answer is yes. You want to work with the longest focal distance possible because that will reduce neck strain and it makes you more comfortable and allows more space for tools or hands while you're working under the loupe. Now, when you're first starting out, it's important to test different focal distances to find one that suits your vision and your workbench setup the best. Start by getting an inexpensive set that has multiple loupes with varying magnification and focal distances and see what works best for you. These loupes are not going to have the best clarity, but you want to determine what focal points you prefer working under before you invest in higher grade loupes because everyone is different. This guy likes working under a number 3, this guy's a number 4, this one's a number 5. You got to figure out what's best for you. The main quality difference between one loupe and another is the shape of the lens and the number of lenses the loupe has in it. Your budget loupes are going to have what's known as a plano convex lens. This is a lens that's curved on one side and flat on the other. The clarity is moderate. There will be some distortion around the edges of what you're seeing, and it's going to have a more narrow field of view. Your better grade loupes are called aplanatic and or have either double convex lens or even 2 double convex lenses. These loupes will have a much higher clarity. They'll have minimum distortion and a much wider field of view. I'm partial to ASCO loupes and their aplanatic double lens, which are convex on both sides, and it's actually one of the best loupes out there. Now, if you wear glasses like I do, the 3 main options are going to be Donegan style, which attach to the sides of your glasses, the Bergeron single clip-on, and the Airy style clip-on. Now, the Airy style clip-ons go around your entire lens. And these are the ones that I like because I find them to be the most stable and secure on the glasses. And not only are they high grade lenses, but they can be taken out and changed. Now, in order to keep the movement protected and stable while you work on it, you need a movement holder. There are two basic styles of holder. You have a universal holder and you have movement specific holders made for a specific size or a specific movement. When you're starting off, just grab two universal holders, one large and one medium size, because they're going to be the most versatile. Later on, if you find yourself working on a lot of Seiko NH movements or ETA 2824s, then you can start moving into more dedicated holders. One thing to be aware of is that I prefer the clamp-in style holders because the movement is secured into the holder. Some of the drop-in style are nice because they come with an adjustable jewel support inside in the center to support the center wheel when you're pressing on tight watch hands. And the other benefit of them is that they're sized to fit into certain watch hand presses. The downside to them is that because the movement is loose inside the holder, if you press down hard near the edge of the movement when you're trying to, say, loosen a tight screw, the movement can come flying out, which is not ideal. The part tray is essential not only when you first start taking movements apart, but you're going to use them throughout. Not only do they keep your parts together and secure, but you're able to group part systems together along with their screws to help you from getting mixed up. After you clean your parts, the tray will keep the dust off during the reassembly process. Now there are lots of different styles of trays. The little round blue tray with the clear plastic dome is popular because they're really inexpensive. There are larger trays with up to 50 compartments that some people like because when they're disassembling a movement, they can have a space for each part and the screw that goes with it. This can be beneficial for some when you're still in the learning process. Now, I like this style, which has styrofoam inserts that protects the pivots, and they can be stacked on top of each other and locked shut. Whichever one you pick, it really doesn't matter. Just use something. A rubber bulb blower is not only handy for removing a stray piece of dust, but it's also used to get the balance rotating without having to touch the balance wheel. Until you get a feel for how delicate the pivots are in the balance, you're not going to want to flick the balance wheel with your finger. And you don't want to blow on it either with your mouth. And the bulb blowers are perfect for doing that. Just get the cheapest one you can find. And if you have camera equipment in your house, you probably already got one. Plastic assembly sticks come in many shapes and forms, but they all do the same thing. They hold a part steady while you put the screw in. They can also be used to secure springs when taking plates off. If you have a piece of pegwood, you can sharpen the tip and that'll work as well. Be creative if you don't want to buy one. Just use something that's not going to scratch the movement. At this stage in your learning process, you really don't need to worry about finger cots and other products for oiling and cleaning. If you're following my course, then all you should be doing is practicing taking the movement apart and putting it back together until you can put all the parts in one pile and assemble the movement without using any reference material or pictures. But there are a couple things I would recommend that you get. Rodico is a watchmaker's putty that is used in the cleaning stages of the disassembly process. It's used to support some parts during reassembly in certain cases. And it's used for cleaning oil up from the movement. It's also very handy in certain situations when you're new for picking up parts that you may be struggling with your tweezers. There's a green Rodico and a gray Rodico. Spend the extra $1 and get the gray. The other thing that you should probably have on hand is pith wood. Now, pith wood is a soft, spongy material that is used for many things like cleaning off the tips of your oilers and tweezers. But it also comes in handy for inserting the wheel pivots for either storing the wheels, right, to protect them, or cleaning them off. You can buy pith wood in uncut lengths or in pre-cut pieces. It doesn't really matter. This video series is made possible by my supporters on Patreon. If you like this type of content, consider supporting the channel. I upload exclusive content only available on Patreon, and there are other perks and benefits as well. The link will be in the description. In our next video, I'm going to go over workspace requirements and some ideas for workbenches. And because there is so much more to learn, I'll see you in the next video.